folks knows the complaints are going on around the state. They know what's being investigated, what's been investigated.
Okay. Let me ask you about a different meeting that happened, and it's the meeting that Chief Pop had with Commander Minor after the investigation was done. The draft was written, and all it was pending signature. Do you recall authorizing Chief Pop to meet with Commander Minor again at that point?
I didn't authorize. Chief Pop said, I'd like to meet with Aaron. I again said, be cautious. I did not tell him that we can make this go away. I would not have done that at that time. I did not agree with the testimony. He never got direction from me to say, you can offer this. In fact, the city even talked about, can we offer something like it doesn't go to close? I said, absolutely not. So never have I ever said, the only time I may have considered is prior to the start of an investigation.
Okay.
That's my testimony.
So that is one thing that you think Chief Pop got wrong?
If he comes in and tells you, I told him to go make a deal and this, we can make this all go away, that's not accurate.
Okay. Let me ask you another part about the Cronin investigation. Prior to going on tape with her interview, you had an off-the-record conversation with her, correct?
I think she set it up. I think it was more of like what you all done here in this hearing where you say this is going to happen, this is going to go on, and then we went on record. She didn't ask me any questions that I answered to the best of my recollection that were pertinent to this off the record. She went on the record every time to talk about it. I think it's not a process. Or she gave me something to read. I actually don't even recall that, but she said she gave me something to read. That's probably true. I reviewed the document.
Okay. So you do recall reviewing a 22-page document regarding Commander Minor's concerns?
Sir, I do not have that recollection, but if she says I did it, then we did it. I don't have that recollection.
Okay. Is it your belief sitting here today that Chief Slavin's comments were not labeled homophobic until Commander Minor's second interview?
No, I made a mistake on that. I think the word homophobic shows up earlier than that. I can't remember exactly where, but I do think that was a mistake of the record.
Okay. Is it your opinion that it's homophobic to turn to a person and ask them if they're gay as a joke or an effort to lighten the mood?
Well, again, words. I don't necessarily believe that this right goes to the level of homophobia. Phobias are irrational feelings. And I don't believe the comment of turning to somebody and saying, joking, inappropriate, not excusable. Either are you gay, if you know the name of the gay, you must be gay. Whichever one of those two is the accurate statement, I don't think that rises to the level of homophobia. Homophobia is a hatred. And what I know of Chief Slavin, and I think even Melissa testified that she doesn't think he's an evil person. I think I know about this man, he's not homophobic. And so I don't think it's a homophobic remark, and that's my opinion.
Okay. You told Ms. Cronin that there's different standards for witnesses and targets of investigations, correct?
And the way I explained that was I believe that when you are the subject of an investigation, that you are required to answer the questions asked.
Okay.
When you are a witness, it's expected you give all the information you have because if you're a witness, you have no protections. So you need to tell everything you know because we need to do a fair, impartial, and complete investigation. So whether it's written in code somewhere, it's pretty well understood. And I think Aaron, being an ex-internal affairs investigator, would know that. I, being an ex-internal affairs investigator, know that. That's exactly what we expect. And I think you, as someone who represents the company, knows that as well, that you tell your clients answer the questions that are asked. But a witness is telling us what happened. A witness is telling what the elements are that we should be concerned about. And we shouldn't have to pry a witness who comes forward willingly to tell us what happened. And so it's not written in policy. Some things are not written in policy. They're just expected, custom and usage.
And so you disagree with Chief Pop's statement there that the standards in Scottsdale are the same?
I do disagree with you.
Okay. So I want to basically wrap up my line of questioning for now by coming back around to where we began this concept. In your statement to Cronin, I think you said if there was a whistleblower in this situation, it was Slavin, right?
Yes, sir.
But Chief Slavin got caught making comments about sexuality and unprofessional statements during a command staff meeting, and those were brought to his attention by another lieutenant, right?
As far as I know, that's correct.
Okay. But Commander Minor didn't have that. Commander Minor actually brought information to his supervisor in a prompt manner on his own initiative, right?
Yes, sir.
And Commander Minor got caught doing the right thing in the manner in which he handled Chief Slavin's misconduct prior to the initiation of any formal investigations, right?
That's correct, yes.
And you knew, and Sergeant Lewis later learned, that Commander Minor had reported this misconduct properly through his chain of command, right?
Yes, that's true.
And you knew that he'd properly elevated Lieutenant Bonnet's complaint up the chain of command, right?
Yes, that's true.
And you also knew that Commander Minor personally confronted Chief Slavin about Chief Slavin's misconduct, right?
That's true, yes.
But you don't think any of that is mitigation or context for what Commander Minor's actions were as part of his integrity investigation?
No, I think they're two separate things. First of all, when I use the term whistleblower with Mary Cronin, I'm talking who brought it to my attention first, since I was the one that ended up giving right or wrong, I'm the one that dealt with it. So the person that brought it to my attention, and everybody else, in terms of whistleblowing, I guess just bringing forward the one that talk, everyone that talks to the witness brings facts forward to someone being a whistleblower, in the broader sense of they brought something forward that people didn't know about. And I don't think Aaron Minor, to the best of my knowledge, was ever retaliated for being a whistleblower. It's the fact that when the time came to make a full, complete, and truthful statement, he failed to do so. And being a whistleblower doesn't protect you from your obligation to give a complete and thorough and honest and truthful statement to internal affairs when they're doing the official investigation into what occurred. And so I don't know that you have to somehow elicit testimony from someone that somehow Aaron was retaliated against for bringing to some cause attention. But the person that brought it to my attention was in fact the person that committed the offense. Damian Mendoza brought it to my attention, right? 6 weeks later, maybe he's the whistleblower. But I never talked to Aaron Minor. I never talked to Bob Bonnett. I talked to Slavin, and I talked to Damian about making a complaint.
So help me out with this. Lieutenant Bonnett can be a whistleblower if he brings misconduct to his immediate supervisor, Commander Minor, right?
He can be a whistleblower, and again, I'm not too sure that Bonnett has seen any retaliation regarding bringing this forward. I hope not. No evidence has come to me that anybody retaliated against Bob Bonnett for bringing this case forward.
Okay. And Commander Minor can be considered a whistleblower in your mind for bringing forward a complaint to Chief Pop, right?
I think Chief Pop would probably say Aaron Minor is the person that brought his attention, yes.
Okay. Okay. The investigation, the integrity investigation into Commander Minor was requested by Chief Slavin, right?
That's correct.
And this integrity investigation request, actually help me with the timelines, because Chief Pop provided some testimony that I thought was pretty interesting. How long between when you asked Chief Pop to look into the Commander Minor statement, how long elapsed between the time that you asked Chief Pop to look into Commander Minor's statement in the first interview and when you brought Commander Minor into your office with Chief Gandara?
I'm afraid, Senior, I'd have to do some research for that. You have the date when certainly you met in the office. That date exists. The date where I brought the Chief Pop, I'm not too sure what that date was. And I wouldn't even calendar that date because I'd be talking to them all the time. So I have no documentation that was an ongoing conversation that occurred about how to handle this particular issue. And it was just free flowing and occurred when people were available. So I can't help you with that. It wasn't a long time. I don't think it was extended period.
Are we talking days or weeks or months?
Many days.
Are you concerned about a perception that Chief Slavin has asked for an integrity investigation that wasn't identified by Internal Affairs, wasn't identified by you as the reviewer, but it was identified by him, and it was directed at somebody who actually had reported his misconduct formally through the chain of command?
No, I'm not.
You don't think that, you don't have a perception issue about the potential chilling effect that that might have on other people who bring forward complaints and then have a chief basically wait for an opportunity to try to get them later?
No. Do you want me to explain?
Sure.
Okay. So I told you the way I looked at the report, review report. The review report. Aaron said, see if I knew anything different. I explained that. Chief Slavin, who asked for a report because everybody else was asking for a report, he thought maybe perhaps I didn't read it. That's why there was a delay there. He read the report and he reviewed it differently than I reviewed it. He reviewed it cross-conversation and he discovered the discrepancy. It doesn't matter who discovers the truth if it's the truth. If he was concocting something or creating something or making something up, you might be able to say that he in fact was being vindictive. But when it's the truth, then it doesn't matter who discovered. I think Alice Huxley said that. Did he say truth undiscovered doesn't cease to exist? It's true. And so if it's true, bringing it forward is appropriate. If it was an allegation that was just annoyance or his opinion or his personal perception, I would say, yeah, I've got some concern about that. But bringing the truth forward, doesn't matter how it gets there if it's true. And that's how I look at it.
Your attorney may object, so don't answer this question until after she's given an opportunity to.
I'll sit back in the chair.
To object to this question, and I'm going to make my offer as to why I think it's relevant, unless the board is not to consider.
Well, I think the only objection was appropriate objection for the privilege.
That's the objection that is probably going to be elicited. So pause and let the lawyers talk for a second before there's a decision as to whether you're going to answer. My offer is that I think the personnel board, and I think this witness, is trying to say that his decision to move forward was reasonable in part because he relied upon the review of Luis Centilla, who is the attorney, who is an attorney with the city. What I would like to ask the witness is if he provided Mr. Centilla with the information that Lieutenant Bonnet and Commander Minor had previously brought forward a proper complaint to their chain of command, which might have provided context to his review. I don't know if the city's going to object to that question based off of what we already have.
Ms. Day?
We do object. With respect to attorney-client privilege issues, Chief Rodbell did share a comment with Mary Cronin about something that Mr. Santea brought to him. We are not asserting that that comment substantively should be considered and should not, what did go into legal or what came out of legal should be considered. We're not waiting for any of those conversations. What can be considered is the process. Did Chief Rodbell go to legal at all? Yes or no? Before he chose to go forward. So if it's just the fact that he did seek legal advice at some point, and if that process piece becomes relevant, that's okay. But anything about what went in or what went out, we're not relying on it and should not be asked.
With that understanding, I don't think I need to ask the question. I think what the city is saying is that you should not consider as essentially mitigating or another level of review whatever the city attorney told him or was told, because I can't ask about the nature of what he was even given to review.
I mean, if there's been no waiver, you can ask it. Request to receipt of legal advice is going to be privileged.
Right. It's my understanding that.
I don't, it's like, would you call the attorney and ask him, what documents did you review? review, that's a whole different issue we're not dealing with here. And he may not know what the attorney reviewed, because he could have given the attorney certain things, and the attorney got other things.
I just want to make my record for the board that privilege can't be used as a sword and a shield. So the fact that he talked to the lawyer, whatever the advice the lawyer gave to him, although part of it is in the record weirdly, that's not supposed to be considered as a mitigating factor.
It looks like you're not going to ask the question.
I won't. I'll withdraw the question based off of the.
Okay, so counsel withdraw, we can move forward.
Let me ask you this. In your mind, if somebody makes a mistake in their internal affairs interview where they truly didn't understand a question and didn't have the proper context or understanding, is that something that would automatically result in termination?
If you're talking about a mistake, then I would say not necessarily. But I don't think this was a mistake.
Okay. And if somebody makes a mistake and they realize it and try to clarify it by saying, hey, can we go back on tape? Is that an appropriate thing for somebody to do if they make a mistake in an internal affairs investigation?
I think it's happened before, yes.
And it's appropriate for investigators to turn back on the tape, and it's appropriate for your witness to ask, correct?
And then read some conflicting testimony as to what actually happened. The answer to your question is yes, but I'm not convinced that what I had conflicting testimony from the two witnesses. So I don't want to apply it to this case, but it's reasonable, yes.
Well, help me out with that. So the standard of review, if there's conflicting testimony for internal affairs, and I think for how you review administrative investigations, is a preponderance of the evidence. Is that accurate?
It's true.
And it's your understanding that the city has the burden of proving that misconduct occurred, right?
It's true.
So basically a tie goes to Commander Minor.
I'm going to object to this question just insofar as this constitutes legal argument, and that's something that the attorneys can
Counsel,
raise in court.
so both are, the board is where necessarily will seek legal advice as to who has the burdens and the decisions on that matter. I don't think I'll use this word, the witness is competent to testify to that, and I don't think it's an appropriate, not even an appropriate question.
And since we're talking about it right now, I think Chief Rodbell might have misunderstood or answered some questions regarding legal advice earlier on about whether this board can change IA findings. And that's part of the statute. The lawyers can argue with you if that's a dispute, but that testimony should not
Just to
be.
be clear, as I understand, we have three options that were set forth earlier, a couple of days ago, is modify, uphold, I can't remember the third, whether it be change or something like that. But that's, I think those are the things that we decide. Everything else we just
The discipline,
Right.
the discipline piece, right?
That's
So,
fundamentally our, and then those different alleged violations we can comment upon.
right, but that doesn't go back and change what is maintained as the official IA record. So I just wanted to clarify
That's
that.
not anything I think the board has any jurisdiction to deal with, so we won't, unless you think we are, and then we probably have to work out. It becomes a question of we'll proceed in that direction necessarily.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if this is the time where you want to hear me on that issue or if we talk about that later.
Well, you can do that in your summations.
Okay. And then I also appreciate, just since we're talking about it, I appreciate the fact that you guys want us to be present and participate in the deliberations and answer questions as appropriate at that point too, so.
If we have any
Right.
in the deliberations to have counsel present,
Right.
may or may not ask you any questions. And my thought on that was mainly if we think we may have missed the fact, and we've been here for two and a half days, I think probably have a better understanding when we've reviewed all the documents today than we did 2.5 days ago.
Sure.
And just so that everybody in the room knows, if there does come up, it seems like there might be a dispute about whether this board can tell IA to change findings, that the city would be relying on, and I'll give you a citation so that everyone can take a look at it. ARS 38-1101, Section 7, that talks about just
Are
cause.
you suggesting that the board would tell IA to change what they decided?
I'm trying to anticipate what Mr. Serbalic may argue, and he said he would like to be heard, so I just.
Mr. Scholar, you think we can go back and say the board had, somehow that the records have to be expunged? Or
No. So what happens basically is the IA record, you're absolutely right, is the record under the public records law. What can happen is, and this is what happens in the jurisdictions that do this a lot, the IA investigation stands as it is. It's basically essentially marked to say this has been appealed, and then whatever the findings of the board are, if there's a, hey, we don't agree with this or whatever, that is a separate thing that the board says, we find just cause does not exist for this particular allegation or that. So the board makes separate and distinct findings. The IA investigation absolutely stands as it is, and it's a public record, you can't move.
I would just request that you contact board counsel, so she can make a determination of what the board has the authority to do in this matter, and report that to them. I want to get into what we maybe discussed in executive session, but ultimately that would be a public matter, so we know what we need to do. But I don't think it's something we should address to the board. I think it's something ultimately our legal counsel has to tell us, because legal counsel may disagree.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody, including legal counsel, has the reference, and to make sure that while we have this witness on the stand, if anybody thought it was a witness question, that we clear it up during testimony.
Oh, absolutely, I agree that this is not, he can't bind the city on that issue. So if that was misinterpreted, and I'll clear up the question. So Chief, when you review internal affairs investigations, the standard for your agency sustaining misconduct is a preponderance of the evidence, correct?
That's correct.
So an investigation is not sustained in Scottsdale, or it's not properly sustained if it's a he said, she said, correct?
He said, she said, without any evidence to move the preponderance of evidence scale,
Right.
they're not sustained.
Right, but if you have two witnesses who are saying something happened versus one who's saying, I don't remember, it may have happened, you would rely on the recollection of those two witnesses, correct?
Given just those facts alone, the answer is yes.
Okay. Give me just a couple moments. Were you aware of a professional, I guess prior to these appeal proceedings, were you aware, or did you think that there was a professional rivalry between Chief Slavin and Commander Minor?
I had heard that. I did not witness any of the behaviors.
How had you heard that? Tell us what you knew about that.
Oh, yeah, I can't tell you where I get it from. It's the police department. I've probably heard it from the chiefs themselves. I may have heard it from commanders. I knew that at some point in time, Aaron was disappointed that I promoted Slavin. And I think that some of the behaviors I was witnessing myself, with clarity, kind of demonstrate some of my concerns or thoughts. And yeah, people talk.
There was some testimony from Chief Pop yesterday that I wanted to see if you could help me out with. And I want to be nice to the guy sitting next to me, so I'm going to try to be careful here. So Commander Minor is not, his general demeanor is not a friendly person. That was Chief Pop's testimony. Is that consistent with your observations of him?
Actually, not. Every time I see Aaron, he says hello, he's cordial. I'm always thinking, he's cordial, he's friendly. I don't know how he interacts with the others. I just know that when he's in my presence, he acts professional.
And I mean, maybe it was a poorly phrased question, but would you agree that he falls on more of the stoic end of the spectrum than like the bubbly, happy, bouncing around side?
I'm going to put in the stoic section.
You put him in the stoic section? Does he tend to be a pretty literal person when he interprets information that's given to him in your past experience?
Might be accurate, yes.
Okay. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the context. Is that fair to say?
in other contexts, it's a fair thing to say.
And in the over 10 years that you've known him, did you ever have any reason to doubt his integrity?
I don't think you and I have ever had issues in the time we've known each other, as you mentioned, probably longer than 10 years.
Okay. And if you had had reasons to doubt his integrity, you certainly wouldn't have promoted him, right?
Promoted twice, and maybe 3 times. I don't know where Aaron was when I first got here in 2002. In which case, it was 3 times he made sergeant in my command, but at least twice, lieutenant command.
Okay. And you would promote somebody if you had questions or concerns about their integrity, correct?
Up until this incident, I had no issues with Commander Minor and his integrity. That's correct.
Is this kind of mind-boggling to you, based off of what you know, as to why he would do this?
Unfortunately, I have had experiences during this career where these things have occurred, and you never really can explain it. You can't get into someone's head as to why, but I've seen this before, unfortunately, and it's disappointing and devastating, and I can appreciate what Aaron and his family are going through. But I have seen this before, unfortunately.
So it's not surprising to you?
Disappointing.
Okay.
I mean, it's Aaron. That's surprising, yes. Disappointing.
And you had no indications that he would ever engage in any type of intentional misconduct, right?
Didn't see that coming.
Okay. That's all I have.
Questions, I redirect them, sorry.
Just very briefly. Chief Rodbell, I will explain the context and then try to ask you a very directed question for purposes of time. There has been some characterization of a delay in investigating Chief Slavin's case. You've told us that you immediately took action to speak with Chief Slavin when he came to you, that you resolved it on the spot, that you made the performance note, and that you had considered that it was completed. Later on, you hear something from Damien Mendoza, and he tells you, there might be something, and you tell him, put it in writing if this is something that you want. And he does. How long was it from the time you heard from Damien Mendoza in writing until the time an investigation was opened as to Chief Slavin?
He said yes, no, it was correct. So almost immediately, and I don't want to mean that as soon as I printed the email and walked down the hall the next day, but it was pretty quick.
Okay. So as far as your understanding goes, would it be more fair to say that you thought it was over, and when you had written notice that it was not over, you took immediate action, that you did not intend to let something linger unresolved like this?
Other than Chief Slavin talking about what he had done to others, telling them what his experience was and how contrite he was and concerned he was, I didn't hear anything about this from the time I dealt with it that day. Of course, the chiefs talked about that, to the time that I got David Mendoza said, I want you to reopen the investigation, consider disciplining an employee. And that's why I said you need to put that in writing, because I've never reopened an investigation unless I've closed it before, unless something new came up. But if this is what you want me to do, then I'll look at it and see something like that. So the answer to your question is, pretty much just the only thing I heard was, dealt with it to, here's a complaint.
Okay. Your intention was not to delay resolution of the Slavin matter, is that right?
Yeah, I thought I had resolved it.
We've talked about the rivalry potentially between Commander Minor and Chief Slavin, and Chief Slavin might have come to POP and have wanted this investigation to be conducted. Was your decision to go forward with the integrity investigation against Commander Minor your decision alone?
Okay, so there's an issue I can't talk about, but the answer would be, I did get some advice.
Okay, and that I will rephrase, and thank you for clarifying and keeping that in mind. I expect that we'll be hearing some allegations that, the investigation was just done because of Chief Slavin, and, he he's driving it and he has some animosity toward Commander Minor and, everyone else just went along with it. And I'm trying to clarify, as chief, you make the decision, not your assistant chief, or at least you made the decision in this case, that going forward with the integrity was warranted. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that if someone is looking for some kind of motive or animus or question for who is the decision maker on officially going forward with this, that you as chief make that decision, and you as chief should be the one whose intentions should be considered.
And I'm hoping I demonstrated that by being the person that's overseeing our affairs and said I'm the person who talked about the process of where we're at with this.
Okay. And I agree.
Yes.
And my question is not, not what were your intentions. I think that's been very well documented with evidence and testimony. My question is intended to clarify that you are the person, that we are not looking at Chief Slavin, that this was an independent of Chief Slavin decision that you made on your own initiative.
That is correct. Chief Slavin gave it to Chief Pop. Chief Pop gave it to me.
Thank you. And Chief Pop did not influence you, or Chief Pop's intention should not be questioned if we're trying to figure out any motive on the part of the decision maker to go forward. Would you agree with that?
So,
And simply stated, you take responsibility for the decision to go forward with the integrity investigation.
I'm absolutely responsible.
We've gone back and forth with some of the witnesses about the distinction between witness and subject, and I know that you recall that testimony generally. Whether or not that expectation or practice or understanding is advisable or not advisable, as chief of the department, that is your understanding of the department policy, is it not? At least an unwritten policy?
Absolutely, yes.
And that policy is applied even-handedly through all internal affairs investigations, not just a few that we have here in this case.
Absolutely, we've been very consistent.
And is that policy consistent with internal affairs investigations that you've reviewed through agencies throughout the state as part of your work with AZ Post?
Well, when you look across the state agencies, sometimes you see inconsistency, but in terms of the integrity violations, it's been consistent, yes. Ones that come to our attention.
So no individual was singled out in your opinion for different standards of testifying in this case?
No.
I'm going to throw out a terrible question and ask it differently. Right or wrong, the policy is the policy, your understanding in the city of Scottsdale?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And it was applied even-handedly in this case, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It is not some special policy that applies only to these cases?
No, ma'am.
That was my question. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. The last little section that I have is, you were asked some questions about the burden of proof. And you have an understanding that to sustain an allegation, IA considers whether they feel that a preponderance of the evidence supports the allegation. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that is accurate, correct?
That's correct. That's the problem.
You're familiar with different standards of proof through your work as a police chief, is that right?
That's right. Yes, ma'am.
In your professional opinion as a police chief of decades, did the allegation of an integrity violation against Commander Minor meet the burden of a preponderance of the evidence?
Yes, it did.
Did it meet any higher burdens?
No, I don't have any question. I think you can look at the evidence of the transcripts and see that there is a reluctance to answer questions fully and truthfully. And so, beyond a reasonable doubt, it is higher than preponderance. It wasn't just a mere typical scale, in my opinion.
So it was not a close call in your view that this constituted a violation of the Scottsdale policies and general orders?
It was not.
Rodbell, question?
The vice chairs, you have some questions?
I do. Good news is, in the 3.5 hours since I asked my first question, many others have been eliminated. So I just have a few left. I think it's fair to say, from what I've heard, that with the Slavin comments on that meeting of the 9th of May, there's a perception of a range of how serious different people thought those were. From a Bonnet to a Minor to a Slavin to you to Posa. You can put different degrees, but I hear you say that it was serious and you took care of it and you dealt with it in a very serious manner. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
So put that aside. The issue I want to ask you about is the time lapse from when this was first reported to you on May 10th to when the investigation opened up on the 28th. Well, I think it officially opened up on the 27th, interviews began on June 28th. It's a reasonable span of time. And IA has given me the impression through their testimony that they try to get after something as quickly to the event timing as they possibly can. Do you think the responses of the multiple interviews, including Mr. Minor's, were impacted by that delay of many weeks?
No, sir, I don't. You have 180 days of investigation or ask for extension for reason. This was what, 48 days later? Again, no one was talking about it in terms of making a complaint to me, internal affairs, that I hadn't already notified that in fact I had dealt with the issue. And quite frankly, dealt with the issue consistently with how these issues are dealt with, but I didn't ask for a report to be written to deal with it. Retrospect, maybe I should have prolonged my response and told the chief, we're going to start an investigation, we're going to roll this out. I just really believe that discipline is best when it's done immediate and in close proximity to the act and move forward. And hold people accountable for the future. The issue, one of your concerns was moving forward. So my point to you is that it wasn't even something I was or even hearing about. And then it pops up from Mr. Mendoza at a meeting saying this occurred. I'm going, you gotta know about that. And I've done that. And so my point to you is, would you think that in that period of time, people would forget either what was said or how it was said or how they felt about what was said? I think the intensity of the interviews that you read from certainly Bob on X, the feelings were still there. It's 40 days later, but the feelings are still there, and they're very honest and very real to Lieutenant Bonnet. So I don't think we lost anything. I don't think we lost anything. I don't think people forgot. I don't think people forgot that they texted in the meeting, talked all the way home, and probably talked many times since that time.
I appreciate that, thank you. In reviewing the transcripts of both minor interviews by IA, did you have any issues with the performance of Sergeant Lewis in those interviews?
You know, my concern with Sergeant Lewis, and we have talked about this, my concern was he didn't have enough information from the witnesses that he interviewed to know where to go next. And so a lot of there's a little responsibility here for witnesses. Sorry, I heard someone must be behind me. So I think his performance, first of all, he's an outstanding internal affairs investigator. Both those gentlemen are great. So I think he was hampered by the fact that he was basically looking for someone to tell him the story so he would know where to go next. Otherwise, the chief of police handed him an email and said, I want you to investigate this. But the names of the people to talk to darkened out at that point, or some point. And he didn't know where to start. Maybe that's my maybe I should have taken the risk. I would be sitting here justifying why I gave clear direction day one. But I chose not to do that in all fairness to the people involved, that the sergeant would do the interviews. And I never anticipated that the first interview he would do was second interview. And I had interviewed people first too. But the second interview he did, it never occurred to me that the person wouldn't tell him what he's already told everybody else. That makes no sense to me. You can't find, it's not acceptable. It doesn't have to make sense to me. But it's a violation. It's inappropriate.
Let me move on to this issue, this term of integrity. Is it policy or practice that dishonesty, untruthfulness is so absolute?
Give you an example, if you like, and you can, I don't know one example.
The question is, is this a right?
It is absolute, sir. And it doesn't matter how small or minor, and I apologize for using the word minor, it doesn't matter how insignificant the lie is. It's an untruthful statement made to your supervisor or made to the internal affairs investigation. It's that important to us. And the entire time I've been here, that's the way we have operated. That is just not something that can be excused.
The question is it policy or is it practice?
I don't know if it's written anywhere, but I talk about it an awful lot, so it's practice, it's a well-known practice. I think there are documents that say it must be truthful. Your question is are we so absolute, correct?
Is
I'm
dismissal
guessing what's in policy is absolute.
If I was one of your sworn officers and on my way out of a meeting in this room, I grab that box of masks that's half full and take them home for my personal use, is that an integrity issue?
Yes, sir, it is.
Would I be terminated?
Would be, yes. If we investigated that and it came out to be an integrity issue for theft of city property, you would be dismissed.
I think this is my final question. When you met with former Commander Minor and brought to his attention the integrity violation, and I think you said you gave him a period of time, maybe a day, to think about it, and come back with, are there other options? What are possible other options?
Okay. Other options were he had enough time to retire. He could resign. I don't know why he would resign, but he had the ability to retire, but that was certainly an option. Another option he could say, as he did, let's go, and we open an investigation. So he had a number of options available to him. And I just wanted him to have some idea. I laid the whole thing out. This is the whole case. Laid it out there. Never done that before. Talk about being prepared. Here's what we have. Think about what my options are. Let me know my options. So yeah, I think he has several options. One of which is to do exactly as he did. Decide to go through an investigation.
But an option would not have been, let me step back a rank.
Never occurred to me that option, sir.
So retire, resign, or continue on the path that we're on.
At this point in time, I do believe that were the three options I identified. Yes.
Thanks for the clarification, very helpful.
Thank you, sir.
I have some questions. First, at the time Assistant Chief Slater came to you, everyone in the room was aware of the comments he made. For some people didn't hear it, well, we don't know because they didn't say anything until 8 weeks later. Do you know if around within days of him making those comments, it was known through the rumor mill or some other way, other than his email, that he may have known, that people may have known he made those comments?
Well, I don't make it a habit of putting people's disciplines out.
Well, no, that's not the
you're asking
question.
if there's any way
He
people
sent
would
the
know.
email, but other than that, just the rumor mill aspect of it, do you think people were aware of it?
One of the problems of being the chief is I don't get the rumors.
Right.
I wish I could get them, because I can clarify or make them happen. I don't know what the rumor mill had. I do know that obviously I sent out to everybody, he sent out to everybody that was there with my name on that. So clearly everyone there was talking about it, perhaps talking to others about it, perhaps. Chief Slade himself, and I expect he'll testify, that he was talking about what he had done as a learning lesson, about what was going to be tolerated. So I know that I was sitting in a meeting where he spoke to, I believe, his command staff, and we all said, yeah, we've got to make sure these things don't occur in our meetings. And so I'm sure the rumor mill had it going. You can't keep much secret in the police department.
In fact, he sent that email, which didn't specifically describe what he said, he was just inappropriate comments to someone who wasn't in the meeting inadvertently. So I think if William sent the same last name, he sent it to the wrong person.
Yes.
So it's also, am I correct that he didn't know asking Lieutenant Myers whether he was gay was an inappropriate comment? I'm correct in that.
You're asking if he said
Yeah,
that?
is that your understanding of the facts that Assistant Chief Slavin made the statement, so he didn't think it was incorrect not to make it because he made it, right?
Yeah, I think the confusion is, which he's going to testify next, I think the confusion was he doesn't recall exactly what he said.
Okay. Now, he then came to you after someone told him he said it. So apparently he didn't realize he said it. Which gets to knowledge, I suppose. But he didn't think anything of it until someone told him that I heard you made some inappropriate comments and maybe describe the comments. Do I have that straight?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Ever hear the expression, did he jump or was he pushed?
Yes, sir.
Where, someone does something not because they do it voluntarily, but because someone activates them to do it. In this case, you said he was self-reported. Well, didn't Assistant Chief Slavin know that there was a concern? So he may have self-reported, but it wasn't something that otherwise would have occurred had someone not told him. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know the answers to that.
Well, there's no what he knew, didn't know. He didn't know until someone told him. That's correct. It's not.
Yes, sir. But I didn't know that the word I used with Mary Cronin could be considered offensive until it was pointed out to me.
Oh, I'm not
No, what I'm saying is.
Oh, yeah, where did Mary Cronin get from? You must have misunderstood.
No, I'm explaining how I'm understanding what you're just telling me. You're telling me that he wouldn't have come to talk to me, he wouldn't have thought he did anything wrong until it brought to his attention he did something wrong. And what I'm telling you is that I've had the same experience with probably all of you. Your concern is because this is such an important issue that he said something inappropriate, he should know that he already said, he did say something inappropriate. You'll have to ask him that. I don't know at what point he would not have realized it.
That's not my question, sir.
Okay, fine.
My question was that you gave him some credit for self-reporting.
Yes, sir.
And my question goes to, he self-reported after someone else told him that what he said was inappropriate. Is that correct?
To order facts, that's true. Whether that's your conclusion based on the order of facts, I don't know the answer to that. That the only reason he came in was because someone talked to him. Someone reminded what he said.
Okay, that's fair. So he goes to you and you see no reason to get human resources involved, correct?
I felt as the senior ranking official in the organization, his direct supervisor, and the person that actually does discipline, that I felt I could handle this immediately, deal with it immediately, hold him accountable immediately, and you're absolutely right, I did not go to HR. And that's what I asked to be investigated.
Okay, and you said he said something about a commander or something in a terrorist attack, and you had no background of what terrorist attack he was talking about?
No, as a newspaper, I wasn't aware of it.
Okay, do you think it would have been useful if you asked him what he was talking about? Well, that's not a fair question. If you had known that you involved a newspaper that was a terrorist attack where 14 people were killed, including some journalists, some people at a Jewish grocery store, and a female police officer, would your actions have been any different?
No, sir, it's the act of the statements that you read that was concerning.
Okay.
Not the reasons for the surrounding facts.
Did you consider that possibly, based upon what he told you, that his statements were a violation of AR 333 Part 1, sexual harassment, person specific?
Rightfully or wrongfully, I did not determine it to be a Part 1 federal violation. I saw it as an inappropriate joke and treated it as a Part 2.
Well,
I didn't interpret it as a Part 1.
well, you know, Attorney Cronin said, you know, federal violation. The rule actually talks about other state and federal laws. And it's also a violation of the Scottsdale Code and the ordinance. So I'm not asking you, was it a violation, I mean, you answered in terms of violation of federal law, but do you think you may have violated the Scottsdale ordinance?
I think he violated Part 2, sir.
Okay, well, let's go through Part 1 for a moment. And I'm talking about what he described to you at the time. Did he describe that he used sexual words to describe an individual? And I'm thinking of what he said to you at the time on May 10th, 2019.
That's the question, I'm sorry, sir.
Yes. On that time, he told you he used sexual words to describe human body.
I treated it as a Part 2 because I did not think it rose to the level of Part 1.
Okay. Did he tell you information did he tell you that he used sexual words to describe an individual?
He either asked the lieutenant.
No, I'm sorry. You're
Well,
not answering my
again,
question. My question is, wait,
The
until I
answer
finish.
is no.
My question is, did he tell you that he specifically asked Lieutenant Myers or described him as a gay person?
What he told me was, he said, I don't know if I said, as he was coming in, I don't know if I said, are you gay? Or, because you must be gay.
Okay, so he described him as a gay individual. Is that a fair statement?
He asked him if he was gay, or he said, because you know the name of the newspaper, you must be gay.
So you didn't consider that using sexual words to describe something. You didn't deem it as an offensive joke, and you didn't deem it a comment of a sexually suggestive nature. Is that a fair statement? Because you just told me you thought it was a violation of Part 2, not Part 1.
Well, I think it was the seriousness of it, but bottom line is, I did make the determination, or at least handle it as a Part 2 offense.
Well, you said it goes to the determination of the seriousness of it. Could you explain your answer?
Yeah, I think that he made a very inappropriate joke, an excusable joke, so don't think I'm minimizing it by not making it a part of mine. I do not think that in trying to lighten the load, making an inappropriate offensive joke in a room that could be taken offense by someone, and then turn to somebody who laughs and says, are you gay, as Part 1 offense in this case. I felt it clearly was wrong, inappropriate, inexcusable, unprofessional, not to be tolerated, and it was at the level, and I handled it as a level 2. That's the facts of the case.
So as you understand it, so I understand. Let me make sure I understand. If a senior officer goes to a subordinate person and says, I think you're a stupid jerk, that's unprofessional, it's definitely a Part 2. Am I correct on that? But if a senior officer goes to a subordinate officer and says, makes a racial comment towards them, that's still a Part 2 if it's done in a joking manner.
Well, again, we're talking semantics here. I'd have to know exactly what's said, what was done. I'd have to have some idea. Slayton did tell me what he did, and there's nothing in the record that said, even after further investigation, that he did something different than what he actually told me. And so by saying somebody goes up and says something racial slur to somebody, no, it could be a level 1. It just depends on the totality of the circumstances.
But you didn't know that when he came. You didn't initiate an investigation. So you don't know the whole context of what Deputy Assistant Chief Slavin said to you. I don't understand.
If he told me something out there, found out was untrue, I think we know where we end up.
Okay. Is it your understanding that sexual harassment has to do with sex only?
You mean, I don't know what that means. Sexual harassment would deal only with sex.
Sex.
You mean,
Does it have any other implications with regard to relationships between people?
you mean different kinds of people?
No, just between people.
I'm not too sure.
Well, in your training-
The sexual harassment has to do with sex. The answer would be yes.
In your training, have you ever been told that sexual harassment some people say it's not about sex, it's about power? Have you ever heard that expression?
Underlining reasons why people abuse people.
So you took what you described as appropriate action, prompt action with regard to Assistant Chief Slavin. What action did you take as regards to other employees within the department?
You're gonna have to tell me what you read.
Okay. Assistant Chief Slavin makes these two comments. You know he's made comments of that nature. You know that at least someone told him, and you received information rather soon, that people were concerned about it. And he writes an email telling people who may have been offended by his comment that he's apologizing to them, not to anyone else. Is that a fair statement?
It's fair statement.
So as far as members of the police department are concerned, is that you had a senior officer asking a subordinate officer how they could likely share their bed. And that's okay as long as you write an email about it?
So let me explain once again what I did.
No, I know what you did, but I'm
So
trying to find out.
the answer to your question is, I handled this issue as I thought it would be appropriately handled. And I handled it immediately, and an email went out to all the people that may have witnessed this to make sure they understood, one, that he was very sad, contrite, and two, he apologized. So as far as, and ended up in his performance evaluation. So the criminal investigation was, and I asked for it, was to look into whether or not I violated HR regulations in the way I handled it. I fully participated in that investigation. So at this point in time, to answer your question, or in the matter of record, I did exactly what you know I did, how I handled, how I viewed it. So I don't know where you want me to go with this, but other than maybe I should come to the realization that he should have been more severely disciplined, or we should have done something else as a result. And I know you all can put into the record your recommendations, and I will take your recommendations seriously and make sure that people that are left behind will take them seriously. But I don't know where you want me to go with this, because you know exactly what I did. And in fact, to a joint agreement between the city and Mr. Minor, an agreement was made to look into my decisions, my
I think you've
actions.
answered my question.
Okay, so
And maybe I have to make it clearer. And Chief, I know, make it clearer. When discrimination occurs in the workplace, there are two issues involved. One, did the person say or do whatever they were alleged to do, and how that affects other people in the workplace. Is that a fair statement?
Okay, sir.
Well, the Assistant Chief Slavin did something that everyone knows he did. And from what I see, the rest of the police department was not told that those acts are not tolerated within the workplace. There's no educational context to others in the workplace, so they may be thinking, and this is the question of concern, gee, I guess it's okay for someone to make a sexual comment, and if they send an email, nothing will happen. Because the city doesn't, or the police department doesn't even say, just want to remind everyone that these, you have to watch what you say in the workplace. There's no training to anyone else. So they're left there with the idea that, I guess that's tolerable. Do you understand what my concern is?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, very respectfully, I have to object to these questions insofar as you're making comments about training and department-wide, citywide policies on sexual harassment. We welcome that scrutiny, but the city has not had the opportunity in this forum, which is about Commander Minor, who has not been accused of any kind of sexual harassment.
This, I think, goes to how others were disciplined or punished, and maybe it does go to the policy of the city, or at least the police department. But my concern is this. It's like hockey. I don't make light of this, but fighting is allowed in hockey, but if you do it, you sit down for a few minutes. It seems to me that from the other employee's perspective, asking a person about their sexuality is allowed. If you write an email, if you go to the chief and write an email, and you're telling me that we know nothing else was done to let employees know this was not tolerated, and I'm wondering if you're concerned about the failure to tell other employees that this type of behavior is not tolerated, because that gets to equal discipline, in my mind. Do you understand what I'm saying now, sir?
Yes, but I disagree with you.
Okay, that's fine.
So my disagreement is in fashion of, these are entirely different cases. Integrity violation and making an inappropriate, unacceptable, unprofessional comment in a meeting are two entirely ends of spectrums for me. Now,
Okay, that's been very clear.
And Mr. Chair, I waited so that he could answer to give you my objection. I do not want to interrupt, and I mean this very respectfully. Your question is asked about what employees think, and I want to just remind everyone in the record that the city is not allowed to call all of those employees in here to tell you exactly what they think. I would love to. We can get it.
Counsel,
but
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
We can't do
that
that
wasn't
here.
the nature of the question. It was generally, again, you know my background, my concern in that regard. General training would suggest that employees have to do things, including, and this is the next question, was anyone who complained ever told that the matter was handled by you? Or did you determine who made the complaint and go back? And I think the answer to that is no, because there's been no evidence of that. So that's, let me move on. You said that you never...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, briefly, I just want to respond to the city's record that I agree with your line of questioning that's relevant.
You'll get a chance to... You said that you never reopened an investigation, or it was unusual to reopen an investigation after it was closed. Did I understand that?
That's correct, yes, sir.
We were talking about internal affairs investigation.
Yes, sir, that's, once an employee's been disciplined for something.
Right. And we've also been told, you've been here, that they didn't go back and talk to Assistant Chief Slavin in the IA-48 interview because he had already admitted that he violated the professionalism because he made the comment about the newspaper. As you recall, he didn't talk about Lieutenant Myers.
No, sir, I testified that I knew about Lieutenant Myers.
No, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but because my question was right in the manner in which I asked him. In his first interview, Chief Slavin only talked about the newspaper comment. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And he didn't talk about the comment to Lieutenant Myers until the later re-interview, well after you closed the internal affairs investigation. And we were told that as the target, he didn't have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, use extreme candor. He had somewhat of a different standard that's applied to a target because he was the target then would be applied to a witness. Am I correct on that?
He has to answer questions honestly and truthfully that they ask.
And why was it necessary to then go back and have him re-interviewed, since he presumably answered all questions asked honestly and completely?
I don't answer that because I wasn't the one directed to go back. You'd have to ask who called him back, why he was called back.
Okay.
I already had the information I needed, and he'd already been disciplined, and I had no new information.
So you have no knowledge of whether he was called back to make sure the record was full, that he had asked, answered everything completely and honestly?
I did not directly go back. That's what I recall.
It is 1:10. We're going to schedule lunch from 1 to 2:15. Any objection by going to lunch now till 2:15? And then we have another 15 minutes for follow-up from the council. Is that okay? We'll go straight now to 2:15?
No objection.
No objection.